Yes, breathe deeply. I don't know about this. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name's Dave Dillon with ChaseToSummit.com, and today we're going to be talking about the Polar Ignite GPS smartwatch. This is Polar's latest offering as a budget GPS smartwatch, coming in at just $229. And you'll see in a little bit, you get a lot for your money here. I haven't had this watch for very long, but I have used it enough to get an idea of its functionality and how accurate it is. So this review is mainly from the perspective of a runner. I run ultra marathons, I run long distances, I run on road, I run on trails. I'm not much of a cyclist or a swimmer, so I can't comment on those unfortunately. But I do ride the indoor bike sometimes and I also do some strength training. This watch brings some unique features to the game and it's pretty interesting. Before we get into it, make sure you subscribe down below and give me a thumbs up if you thought this was a helpful video. It means a lot to me and it also helps out my channel quite a bit. Also want to thank everybody for getting me past the 1,000 subscriber milestone. I'm pretty pumped about that. Pretty surprised too. I'm kind of an introverted guy, so being in front of the camera like this doesn't come naturally to me. Polar was nice enough to send this out to me, but this is not a sponsored review and I'm allowed to give you my honest opinion. Let's start off with the build quality. This watch is made mainly out of plastic, but it also has a stainless steel bezel and a dragon tail glass screen. As best I can tell, this is just kind of like a Gorilla Glass knockoff. It's probably the same thing. I haven't tried to scratch it, but it does seem pretty durable and it does have a nice smooth surface. That smooth surface is pretty important because this is a touch-enabled device and most of your interactions with it will be through the touchscreen. It sits about 8.5 millimeters tall off your wrist and it's super low profile, but this is coming from a guy who wears this clunky Garmin Fenix 6 for a daily driver. This is a pretty small and light device to me. It comes in at just 35 grams with the strap, and it's really hard to tell you're even wearing it once you get used to it. No problem sleeping with this thing. There's no sharp edges. It's really comfortable. The included band has a ton of adjustment holes, so you can really dial in that fit. Around the back of the device, we have a familiar Polar heart rate sensor. We've seen this on the Vantage series watches. It's also here on the Ignite. This thing has a ton of LEDs, and I find it to be pretty accurate. We'll get into that in a little bit. As far as charging goes, there's an included cradle that comes with the watch that plugs into any USB port. It's really easy to dock it. It has a little magnet that keeps it interlocked. And I think it's actually possible to wear the watch and charge it at the same time, which is kind of nice if you had a little USB power bank or something. One of the most noticeable features about this watch is its LCD display. This is a lot more vibrant than you'll see on like a Garmin or a Suunto watch. It's basically like a cell phone display, so it's really bright and all the colors are very vivid. The downside to that is that this is not an always-on display. As you can see there, the display shuts off when you're not active or looking at it. When you flip it down and flip it back up, maybe? No. So this is another part of the review. We'll get into it a little bit. The display itself is 240 by 204 pixels and it's got a great color gamut. I think it looks great. It has very little edge bleed. The blacks are very black and the whites are very white. Now the inherent downside to this type of display is when you're reading it in direct sunlight. It's a lot harder to read compared to like a Garmin or a Suunto transflective display. As you can see here, I'm outside in direct sunlight and both displays are on, but it's really hard to tell that the Polar is on at all. That being said, the Polar Ignite does have an ambient light sensor, so when it is in a bright situation, it'll boost up the backlight to try to compensate for that. However, there's only so much it can do. It's just like looking at your cell phone in direct sunlight. Sometimes it can be a little challenging. For the most part though, I've gone on a few runs with it and it hasn't been that big of a deal. I'm able to see if I look for a little bit or I find some shade near a tree or something like that. It's not that hard. Now, what is kind of challenging is the gesture to turn on the backlight. A lot like the Apple Watch or some of the Garmin devices like the new Venue, it has gesture enabled backlight. So you flip up your arm and it's supposed to turn on the watch. I've had mixed results with this. I don't know why. Maybe it's just the device I have, but when I flip it up, sometimes it doesn't turn on and sometimes it does, but it's a little bit delayed. You can also turn on the backlight with the single button that's on the side here. The downside to that is if you flip up your arm and it's delayed and then you hit the button when the display actually comes on, you'll pause or end your activity by accident. And I've done that a couple of times. It's kind of irritating. Now, the other downside that comes with a really bright and vivid display is battery life. Polar tells me that you can get up to 17 hours in GPS mode with heart rate enabled, and you can also get up to 5 days of standby time in regular smartwatch mode. That's not too bad. I mean, 17 hours should be enough for most people to run up to like a 50K, even 50-mile distance. Anything more than that, you'll want to bring your charger along and charge it as you go. Where this type of display really comes into its own is in like day-to-day life. As a smartwatch, smartwatch, this is super functional. When a text message rolls in, you can scroll through it with your finger just like you would on like an Apple Watch. I also really like the design of this watch. It's very subtle and muted, very minimalistic. It fits in at the office, at the gym, wherever. It's not screaming out for attention. This watch is also waterproof down to 30 meters, which is pretty great. It actually has some built-in swimming functions, including open water, which is kind of surprising in such a low-priced watch. I'm personally not much of a swimmer, so I can't comment on that. If you're a triathlete and you do multi-sport activities, this may not be the watch for you. Yes, you can go swimming with it, but you can't do triathlon multi-sport events like you can on the Garmin Suunto Chorus line of watches. Or you can step up to the Vantage series, which is Polar's higher end device, and that also has triathlon mode. Don't get me wrong, you could still use this at a triathlon, but you'd have to manually stop and start activities when you switch from swim, bike to run. And I'm sure that's kind of frustrating. Like I said, I'm not much of an Ironman, I'm more of an ultra runner, so I can't really comment on how well it would work in that situation. This watch connects to your phone using Bluetooth Low Energy. This is the preferred connection for most smartwatches because it doesn't draw a lot of extra power from either device. The standard watch face on the Polar Ignite is not customizable at all. It gives you the time, it gives you basic information like the battery level and your connection to your phone, but you can't do anything wacky like put Mario on it like you can on a Garmin. I do like the watch face, it's minimalistic and really it's functional, so you don't need much more. This watch has some interesting sleep tracking functions. Polar calls it Sleep Plus. Sleep Plus is really interesting. It basically tries to estimate if your body has recovered from your previous day's activities. Say you ran a marathon yesterday and you didn't sleep that great. Obviously, the next day you don't want to wake up and run a 10K. And the watch will tell you this. It'll tell you that maybe you should try some yoga today. And this is where FitSpark comes in. FitSpark will give you recommendations on activities for the day based on your recovery. This is a really cool implementation, and I'm curious to see how this pans out in the future. Garmin does something similar to this called Body Battery, but Body Battery is a lot more basic. It basically just gives you a charge level like you're a battery, and as you sleep, you charge up your battery, and as you exercise, depletes your battery. The Polar Sleep Plus is actually taking all that data and giving you recommendations on how to recover and what exercises would be the most productive to your day. For instance, today, FitSpark is telling me I should focus on strength training. Swiping through the main display's widgets, you'll find the clock with your latest training session, your nightly sleep recharge screen, the FitSpark screen with recommended workouts, your activity level for the day, and your current heart rate. By clicking on any of the screens, you go deeper into that widget. For instance, this is the heart rate screen. By clicking the single button once, you enter the training mode. You can cycle through indoor cycling, treadmill run, yoga, other outdoor, other indoor, group exercise, strength training, running, swimming, cycling, and more. All these activities are also customizable through the Polar Flow iOS and Android application. Within the iOS and Android application, you can dive deeper into these activities and customize the data fields on all of your pages. Unfortunately, in the running activity, there's not a whole lot of options to choose from. They have all the basic functions like pace, average pace, last lap, average heart rate, all that stuff, but nothing more. After you record an activity, you can review all of the data within the Polar Flow application. There's also a website where you can view this stuff on the computer. I really like the website. It makes it a lot easier to view my data, and I'm a lot more comfortable with that. After you run and view your data, you'll find a Polar running index measurement. And this is basically a quick score that tries to tell you your VO2 max. So I'm not sure how accurate it is. I've honestly never been tested for VO2 max, so I can't tell which device is totally accurate. I do know that my Garmin's have floated around the same number, 54, 55, through various devices over several years. So I kind of trust that as a baseline. The other way to get your VO2 max on the Polar Ignite is with a fitness test. This is interesting. I think it's based off your resting heart rate. Basically, the watch tells you to lay down and relax for 3 minutes. After the 3 minutes is over, it'll give you your score, which is basically your VO2 max measurement. But I'm a little confused how they're basing your VO2 max off of your resting heart rate. I do understand that a lower resting heart rate is the result of being fitter, but it's not everything. But it is an interesting way to get a quick measurement. However, if they're basing this off of resting heart rate, then your data might be skewed if you're a little sick or you're recovering. So as far as running goes, this is a great device. It's very comfortable to wear. It gives you all the data you need to see. Like I said, it's a little hard to read in direct sunlight. As far as accuracy goes, I went on a few runs wearing my Garmin Fenix 6 and the Polar Ignite on the same wrist at the same time. I recorded multiple tracks and analyzed them back to back for both GPS accuracy and heart rate data. There's good news and bad news here. First off, I'll admit that the Garmin Fenix 6 isn't perfect. It uses the same Sony GPS chipset that's found in a lot of other devices, and unfortunately, it's not the most accurate GPS tracker. When I compare the Polar Ignite track to the Garmin Fenix 6 track, you can see that there's some discrepancy here. When I ran this course, I ran 6 miles out and ran 6 miles back on the same track. I deviated for like a quarter of a mile at one spot. The idea here is I wanted to follow my footsteps to see how far off the GPS wandered when they're right on top of each other. I did not cross the street. I stayed on the same side of the road when I went out and back. So ideally, these tracks should be right on top of each other. As you can see, neither watch is right on top of each other. And this was a sunny day with no cloud cover. At the end of the run, the Garmin Fenix 6 recorded exactly 12 miles, whereas the Polar Ignite recorded 12.07. I mean, that's pretty dang close. Yes, I know I'm comparing an $800 watch with a $200 watch, but really I'm just trying to look at GPS accuracy as a whole here. And yes, I did have high accuracy mode turned on, which I think is GPS plus GLONASS. Overall, it's an okay performing GPS watch. It's not perfect by any means, but it definitely gets the job done. Now, when it comes to heart rate, it did a lot better. Again, I don't know which device is more accurate. I was not wearing a chest strap at the time. My Garmin Fenix 6 recorded an average heart rate of 150 beats per minute, whereas the Polar Ignite recorded 149 as the average. So they were very close. When I looked down at the two watches during my run, I noticed that they were very similar. At times, it seemed like the Polar was spiking a little bit more, but it could have just been the data field, because when I reviewed the data on the computer after the fact, they looked very similar. Here, you can see me overlaying both watches' heart rate tracks on top of each other. There's some variation, but there's not a whole lot. You gotta remember, this is a wrist-based heart rate, so it's not gonna be perfect. The best accuracy will always come from a chest strap. But both of these devices do pretty well here. As you can see, this thing has like 1,000 LEDs on the back for the heart rate sensor, so that might explain why it does pretty well in the heart rate department. One thing I did find kind of odd was the elevation gain during that 12-mile run. The Polar Ignite told me I gained 702 feet, whereas my Garmin Fenix 6 told me I gained 200 feet. Keep in mind, the Garmin Fenix 6 has a barometric altimeter in it, so it's going to be a lot more accurate, whereas the Polar Ignite does not. It's basing this purely off of GPS data. Now, I know for a fact there are no big hills in that run. There's no way I gained 700 feet of elevation gain. Another feature that's available in the Polar Flow app is building workouts. They have things like the Couch to 5K, up to marathon distances to help you form a training plan. This all gets uploaded to your watch and you can perform your training right here on the device itself. You can also build custom workouts if you have a particular goal in mind. So even though you set the watch to imperial distances, miles and feet, the watch will still alert you in metric intervals at kilometers. This took me a while to figure out. I had to dive deeper into the app to find where to turn this alert off. Anyways, you're able to disable that. Just keep in mind it's kind of buried in the settings a little bit. So who's this thing for? I think it would fit a lot of people's needs. The only hurdle you gotta get past is that not always on display. I really have an issue with that. I don't like the flick of the wrist to turn things on. I like to just be able to look and see and tell what time it is right away. And with the Polar Ignite, you can set it to be always on, but then you're gonna burn battery like crazy. If the LCD display doesn't bother you, this is a great device for beginner runners all the way up to marathoners and even some ultra marathons. This is also a great overall wellness device. I think this is a great device for people just looking to improve their fitness, trying to get more active. I think it's really going to give companies like Fitbit a run for their money, because for $200, you're not getting GPS in the device from Fitbit. There's not much in this price bracket that can do all of the things that this can do. And with a battery life of 17 hours in GPS mode, that's enough battery for most people. That said, it does have its quirks and it may not be for everyone. But for $229, you're getting a lot for your money here. And it helps that it looks pretty cool too. What do you think about the Polar Ignite? Is it worth $229? Are you picking one up? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you subscribe and give me a thumbs up if you thought this was a helpful video or at least entertaining. Have a great day. I'll see you in the next one.